Hey, what's up guys? This is Larry B. I'm finally done with my benchmarks of the GTX 1050 Ti running in the $500 Ryzen 3 2200G gaming build I made a video on. The point of this video is to show what kind of performance you can expect by upgrading from the Ryzen 3 2200G's integrated graphics to a dedicated GPU. Before we start, let's take a look at the system and GPU. Alright guys, for the system we have a Ryzen 3 2200G with 16 gigs of 3200 DDR4 RAM. For specifics, I suggest checking out my video titled Ryzen 3 2200G build $500. For the GPU, we have a Gigabyte GTX 1050 Ti. The GTX 1050 Ti offers 4 gigs of video RAM. This particular model has a single fan for cooling and does not require an external PCIe power connector. My reasoning for choosing a single fan 1050 Ti that does not require a PCI power connector is because I found that they hold resale value fairly well. Once you're ready to move off this 1050 Ti, you can easily sell it to someone looking for a small, low-power GPU for a home theater PC. Okay, so now that the specs are out of the way, it's time to take a look at our gaming benchmarks. When possible, I benchmark using real gameplay. This can lead to inconsistent numbers, but I feel like only through in-game benchmarks can you truly know how hardware will handle a game. The first game we'll be looking at is Civilization 6. Out of all the games benched, this is the one I'm forced to use the synthetic benchmarks for. My reason for this is I do not have a save that properly represents late game Civ 6. For the settings, I went with medium preset, 1080p, no VSync. Looking at our numbers, we saw an average FPS of 71 with a 1% low of 56. If we go back over our results from the Ryzen 3 2200G integrated graphics, we saw an average FPS of 42 with a 1% low of 28 with 16 gigs system RAM. The game was fully playable on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics, but we see that adding a dedicated GPU brings us past the 60 FPS sweet spot for average FPS. Let's move on to our next game. For the next game, we'll be taking a look at Diablo 3. For the settings used in Diablo 3, I'll post a picture here. Running our Diablo 3 benchmark, we saw an average FPS of 128 with a 1% low of 85. Clearly, the GTX 1050 Ti is overkill for Diablo 3 running at the settings used, and I'd suggest increasing the settings for higher visual fidelity. Going back over our numbers for the Ryzen 3 APU, we saw an average FPS of 58 with a 1% low of 44 at 16 gig system RAM. Much like Civ 6, Diablo 3 was very playable on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics, though moving to a dedicated GPU will give you room for increasing visual settings or taking advantage of a high refresh rate monitor. Let's move on to our next game. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing for more videos like this. The next game we'll be looking at is Far Cry 5. For this game, we saw such a massive improvement in gaming performance moving from the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics to the GTX 1050 Ti that increased the res to 1080p and settings to medium presets. For the result, we see an average FPS of 59 with a 1% low of 54. For comparison, we saw an average FPS of 39 and 1% low of 30 with 16 gigs of system RAM on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics at low presets 16 by 900. Far Cry 5 shows clear benefits of moving from integrated graphics to dedicated graphics. We were able to not only increase the game's resolution, but also increase the settings used. Odd issues like black boxes showing up on the map were resolved. That brings us to GTA 5. Like Far Cry 5, I increased the graphic settings for running this benchmark. I'll post pictures of the settings used. You can pause the video and read over the settings. For our results, we saw an average FPS of 72 with a 1% low of 56. Looking at the results from the Ryzen 3 2200G integrated graphics, we saw an average FPS of 68 with a 1% low of 52. It's important to remember that I did increase the settings used for my 1050 Ti benchmarks. Overall, I was very happy and impressed with how the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics ran GTA 5. Moving to a dedicated GPU did allow for increasing many of the graphic settings in-game for greater visual fidelity, though the overall gaming experience were similar on both setups. The next game we'll be looking at is State of Decay 2. I did not include State of Decay 2 in my Ryzen 3 2200G benchmark video, though I did make a video dedicated to the game. For the benchmark, I ran State of Decay 2 at medium presets 1080p. Looking at the results shows an average FPS of 60 with a 1% low of 31. Going over our results from Ryzen 3's integrated graphics shows an average FPS at 32 with a 1% low at 23. It's worth noting that Decay 2 averaged 60 FPS at low presets on the Ryzen 3 2200G integrated graphics. Decay 2 is another example of a game that saw huge benefits moving from the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics to a dedicated GPU. We were able to go from 30 FPS to 60 FPS at medium presets, and the game was overall much more enjoyable to play like this. It's time to look at our final game. The last game on the list is Doom. Unlike the other game's benchmarks, I have not benchmarked Doom on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics. For settings used, I'll post pictures here. You can pause for a closer look. Looking at our results, we see an average FPS of 78 with a 1% low of 60. Since I've not benchmarked Doom on the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics, I don't have numbers to compare here. I will say that the game played smoothly and was very enjoyable using the Ryzen 3 2200G and GTX 1050 Ti. Let's take a look at how the system sounds with the GTX 1050 Ti in there. Alright guys, it's time to take a look at the sound. Basically, I've been running Heaven 4.0 for the better part of an hour on the GTX 1050 Ti. Let's see what the numbers are. Alright, as we can see with the 1050 Ti in the system, the sound is definitely louder. It's definitely a little more audible. What I'd probably break this down to is a few factors. First off, the 1050 Ti is a single fan variant. And then secondly, with the 1050 Ti in the system, it's just everything's able to just run harder. So we're probably hearing like not only the 1050 Ti fan be ran harder, but most likely we're also hearing the CPU fan being ran harder, and likely the case fans too. So I think it's just the result of putting more powerful hardware in the system. Everything just runs harder. Overall, though, I'd say that if you had to decide on this case, you probably wouldn't be bothered by the noise too much. So there you have it, guys. My look at the Ryzen 3 2200G with a GTX 1050 Ti. Overall, I'd say I'm happy with the results. Every game saw notable improvements moving to a dedicated GPU, and the GTX 1050 Ti makes a worthy upgrade from the Ryzen 3's integrated graphics. For my next video, I'll be taking a look at how the GTX 1066 gig does when paired with the Ryzen 3 2200G. Expect the video to be released next Friday. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps motivate me to keep making these types of videos. Other than that, thanks for watching and good luck, guys.